Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by author, leader, and storyteller, Jene Burk. Jene has over 30 years of operations experience. He has a passion for martial arts, as well as mentoring and inspiring others. So we're going to be talking to him about everything that he does and what he's going to be up to next. So Jene, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, real pleasure to be on your show. Thank you.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so been in operations management for over 30 years, actually coming up on 40 years. So I have a wealth of operations management experience across quite a few different platforms. I've been involved in the martial arts for many years. Truly enjoy that. Have a wonderful family, wonderful wife, kids and grandkids, and I enjoy particularly helping younger folks as they're coming in, especially into the workforce, but also in general. It's a real passion of mine, just because I think in society today, um, many younger folks in particular, but really everyone, they need maybe a little bit of mentorship and guidance, and hopefully I can help in some small way.
Okay, well, tell the listeners what made you want to get into operations and martial arts.
Well, kind of funny. So originally, operations management was something I wasn't planning on. And believe it or not, originally I wanted to be a psychologist. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and my original plan was to become a psychologist. But, life has its turns, and, I couldn't complete school. So I actually went into management. Oddly enough, obviously this is many years ago. I think I was on a line for UPS, and I lived in Brooklyn at the time. And UPS used to have biweekly kind of call outs where they would have people coming in. And at the time I just needed a job, and I was the only out of about 100 people online. I was the only guy in a suit. So one of the managers was walking down the line and saw me and said, "Hey, come talk to me." And he found out that I had a degree in psychology and I had a college degree in general. And then that kind of started my path inadvertently into the operations field. So it wasn't my original plan, but it worked out quite well. And then with the martial arts, I was involved originally when I was younger. Actually, I started out in weightlifting. Um, and did many years in weightlifting, competed in some bodybuilding shows when I was younger, did some college, on-campus college powerlifting. I've done Highland Games and things like that. But, martial arts became a passion of mine just because, I was always intrigued by not just the power of it, but also just the concept of it. And, I explored a lot of different styles, and I found a great teacher, and it started my path in the martial arts. So that's been quite a journey, quite a fun journey.
So what made you feel the need to start sharing your insights and experience with the world?
Well, great question. So, I had two great parents, but I come from a broken home. And I know that sounds cliche maybe today, but, as a young man, I would see my, father, really on Sundays. And, when you're growing up you know, as a, as a young kid and a teenager, you're not going to go talk to your mom about a bunch of stuff. When I began to, and then as time went on, I learned a lot from that, obviously. And then as I've gone through the operations as a manager over the years, and I've seen so many young folks coming into the workforce, and and in the martial arts, I would see so many, young folks coming into the school, and you would see kids coming in, and they might be shy or not have a lot of confidence, and working with the instructor, Alfred DeGrazia, absolutely phenomenal instructor, a dear friend of mine. But you would see people change, and you would see the confidence grow, and become more self-assured. So, I began to think back, over the last few years about, maybe is there something I can do, maybe to, give some, listen, I'm no expert, uh, everyone's different. But having said that, I've been around long enough and been exposed to enough situations and seen enough young people coming into the workforce and developing that I thought maybe I could give some pointers and some tips to help people become more successful and transition into the work world a little easier.
Where you also talk about how important it is to take care of yourself professionally and personally. So explain to the listeners how important that is and why that's a passion of yours.
Yeah, so it's really, really important. One of the things, and I have these conversations all the time, you know, and I have conversations internally in my own head about this, because humans typically, people are typically very, very hard on themselves. And, very often we will be much more difficult with what we'll say to ourselves internally than what we would ever say to somebody else. So, from a mental standpoint and from a mental health standpoint, I think it's very important to, people give themselves a break a little bit. We live in a very stressful world. There's a lot of things pulling us in a lot of different directions. And, in line with that, I think particularly in Western culture, we've kind of forgotten the mind-body connection, so it's really important to the best of the people's abilities. Everyone obviously has different abilities, restrictions. That could be physical restrictions, that could be time restrictions, that could be environmental restrictions. But to do your best to take care of your body and your mind, because that affects the mind, And I think we've kind of forgotten a little bit in the West that, what affects the body absolutely affects the mind and vice versa. We've all had days where, you're very stressed out, and because of the stress, you might be getting a very bad headache, or you might have an upset stomach, and, vice versa. You could be in absolutely an elated mood and feel great about yourself and, take on a physical task that, sometimes in the past might have seemed more difficult, but because you're in a great frame of mind, it seems easier. So I think it's really very important for people to look at all aspects. It's not one or the other, it's both. And I think people, and this may sound cliche as well, but I think people need to be kind to themselves, as well as to those around them, obviously. But I think it's very important for people to take a break. And that's one of the reasons why I think like martial arts, in my book, The Dojo of the Mind, I I use that martial arts as an example because I've seen it with myself, and I've seen it with so many people over the years. So what I think is really, and I think it's proven time and again, and even before the martial arts with weightlifting, I had the same experience. When you're doing something that's focusing your attention outside of yourself, it gives yourself, oddly enough, a break. So, if I was in the dojo, the karate school, and we were having a particularly hard class that day, whether it was because the topic was difficult to learn or the physical demands of the class was very hard. I can tell you, I wasn't thinking about what a bad day I had at work the day before. I wasn't thinking about all the problems I had. I was thinking about what's right in front of me, and I need to get through this. And that could be with, weightlifting, like martial arts, for example. It could be gardening. It could literally be anything that helps you take yourself out of yourself a little bit. And I know that may sound like an odd phrase, but I think so many times mentally we're looped into patterns, and neural pathways over time become stronger and stronger. So if someone is constantly worried about something in particular, it becomes easier to worry about it, just because your neurons are firing in a certain way, and it becomes kind of a pattern. So I think it's really important to break the pattern sometime, and to give yourself time for yourself. And I think that's very important, and be kind to yourself.
Well, you mentioned your book, so go ahead and tell the listeners about your book, to tell them what they can expect. You got three books, so tell them what they can expect when they read them and where they could get them.
Oh, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So I have three books out, and a book that's kind of a booklet. It's more of a soft skills self-defense book, but the Dojo of the Mind kind of it ties into the mind-body connection and how the martial arts, and I use martial arts as an example here, but again, it could be any sport, any activity. It doesn't have to be a sport. It could be, anything that's physical. How it can help with mental wellness. And one of the things I stress in the book, which is really, really important is, and this is especially for men, young men and men in general. Um, if you're having problems, having some emotional problems or some mental wellness problems, it's really, really critical to seek out professional help. I think part of the problem, especially, in Western culture is, especially for men, if you ask for help in that manner, you're considered weak or you're considered, yeah, I mean, weak, literally. I mean, there's no other better way to say it. And I think that's actually a strength, so, but the book goes into how training can help with things, with goal setting, with resilience, with building self-confidence, the sheer joy that you can have in training. You have to be kind of stoic sometimes because the training can be difficult. Hey, you have to be stoic sometimes because you might not want to go to class because maybe you had a really bad day at work or, and this could be even going to the gym, this could be anything. But, you have to kind of develop the discipline to go. And, most of the times when you go, you force yourself to go. You feel better after it. So, and it goes through a whole list of categories, self-compassion and, realizing that you're going to fail. I think that's one of the things that hold a lot of people back. And I see this a lot with young folks coming into the workforce. They're terrified to fail. The only way you fail is if you don't learn from it. So there's a Japanese phrase that really resonated with me, and that's the phrase is 7 times down, 8 times up. And the philosophy behind that is, you're going to fail, but as long as you get up, you're not failing. So that book kind of covers that. I have another book called The Iron Road. And what that's about is, and I actually originally wrote it for young men specifically, but the feedback I've gotten on it from some of the readers is that, it's equally as important for young women. And this book goes into, because and this is it's kind of a guide, if you would say, how to build your own brand. One of the things that I don't think people realize is, and we all know this, but it's not really often talked about, is everyone develops their own brand. So, like there's Coke, there's Pepsi, there's, Mountain Dew, use that as example of brands. Well, we all know that there are people that you could be in, let's say you're at a party and someone walks into the room. And we all know there are some people that just light up the room, right? Immediately they walk into the room, everybody feels better. And there are also people who will walk into a room and everybody's stomach sinks because they know something's going to happen, meaning, some drama or something. That's a brand. You've developed that brand over time. So what this book addresses is how to develop good patterns, the power of your word. If you give your word, you're going to do something, no matter how uncomfortable it is doing it. If you're giving your word to do it, you really should follow through with it. To think about what you're saying, mindful speech, really kind of think about what you're going to say, the power of words, people often think about abuse as physical. You can say something to a friend, doesn't really impact strangers that much. It can certainly, it can have different outcomes with strangers, meaning it can go in a direction you're not anticipating. And typically, if you've said something, really unkind, it could turn into a situation that you weren't anticipating, which might not turn out well. But power of speech is so powerful. You could say something to a friend in a moment of anger that can change that relationship forever. And once it's out there, you can't take it back. So, things like that, how to transform, people, we live in a very materialistic world and people are always looking for more. And, a lot of people I talk to, some people at work and you talk to some of these young folks coming in and they seem kind of jealous about what other people have. Well, how do you transform that? How do you transform that jealousy into admiration and then drive? to get better or to try to achieve more. So that book goes into a whole list of steps people can take and reflections they can do to build their own personal brand, both professionally and personally. I mean, it crosses both ways. And then another book I have is called Striking Success. This is a Striking Success and actually Dojo of the Mind right now. I'm revising both of the editions, so they'll be back up on Amazon within a couple of weeks. But all of these books are found on Amazon.com if you just search Jene Burk. And Striking Success was about how martial art philosophies can transfer very effectively into leadership principles. So it's really, really good for young managers coming in, new managers coming in, and mid-range managers coming in, because it goes over everything from, keeping mental clarity, keeping emotion out of business decisions, which can be, fatal in a business decision if you're very emotionally driven by something and not always thinking clearly, how to be aware not only of yourself. Often people are not self-aware of what they're doing and how their actions are impacting others, but also be aware of your surroundings, your competition, and your team. How to think strategically. In the martial arts, you have to think about ways to beat your opponent. So all these things kind of tie into the principles from martial arts, very effectively translate into good leadership skills. And I did a booklet. It's called Eyes Wide Open, and it's basically it's kind of unusual, I think. It's a self-defense book that doesn't really have any techniques in it. It's all about the soft skills of self-defense, how to look for danger, how to avoid danger, what's your physical capabilities, what can you do, what can't you do, what are you willing to do, what don't you think you can do, a lot of the things that people don't think about in self-defense. But unfortunately, if you're not aware of it and you find yourself in a potentially dangerous situation, the outcomes might not always turn out the way you want. So those are some of the things I worked on. And I enjoyed the process very much of getting it out there. And it's been a fun ride doing that.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay, everybody, it's Michael E. Cullen II.
And I'm Sesame and Carta from the All Too Real 2 podcast. We're passionate about movies, TV, and pretty much all things pop culture.
Dive into the chaos of failed sitcoms, direct-to-video sequels, and the quirky realms of cinema and TV.
Join us every Thursday for your dose of All Too Real 2 entertainment.
We'll guide you through the debates like whether Howard the Duck qualifies as a superhero.
Ponder if Larry the Cable Guy could be the new Rock or Schwarzenegger.
Discover if some shows and movies should have stayed in the cutting room.
Ever heard of a sitcom featuring that dictator with the funny mustache? Well, we watched it.
We're dedicated to unraveling the peculiarities of pop culture, sometimes with awesome guests.
So, if you're into the eccentric world of pop culture,
listen and subscribe to All Too Real 2.
Available wherever you find podcasts
and on Age of Radio.
So you always talk about mentors matter. So explain to the listeners the importance of having a mentor.
Yeah, I think especially today, I think it's so critical. I think that, we're surrounded by negativity today. It's really almost fascinating, but I mean, all over the news. If you pull up YouTube videos, the majority of YouTube videos are typically can be a negative connotation. And we're always told things are bad and, it just sets a bad mindset. So I think it's really important, especially for young people. And it could be anyone, really. I mean, I have some mentors, I have a dear friend of mine who's a mentor of mine. We're about the same age, but his life experience, he's been places I haven't been. So, I bounce stuff and ideas off him. But mentors are really important because they give you a fresh perspective on something that maybe you haven't experienced. And for young folks, mentorship, I think, is important because they get, and when I mean mentorship, I mean like obviously a positive mentor, right? So sometimes a mentor has to tell people something they may not want to hear. But if it's done in the right way, with the right intention and the right tonality, you can positively change someone's life. So, you know, mentors, I think, are very important because they could help guide people, young folks, down paths that they may not even thought of. I could tell you, like, one of the things I think is really important, I'll go back to failure again. Some of the greatest lessons I've learned have been through failure. Things I never would have thought of um, happened because I failed at something. And through talking to folks, people that were around me, and, it's kind of a mentorship, um, I discovered some other paths that maybe never would have crossed my mind and turned out to be very productive in the end, very beneficial in the end. So mentors, I think I think it's great for people to have. And a mentor could be someone who's, face to face. A mentor could be through books. A mentor could be through, you could find someone that you really like on, for example, YouTube or podcasts like your show, that provide positive reinforcement, provide good guidance to folks, and allows the free exchange of information, which I think is critical. I think a good mentor could change someone's life. I really do. And I think it's an ongoing process. And the mentors can change over time. You might have a mentor when you're in your 20s and someone different in your 30s and so on and so forth. So I think it's critical.
Absolutely, it definitely is. So tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
Yeah, so actually it's kind of funny. I'm exploring and this is really fun because now again the process is, and during this process I failed a number of times, trying to understand how to get it done. But I'm starting some YouTube channels, some content creation. And one of them is it's called 3M Productions. It's YouTube and then slash and then at 3M Productions VA. And what I'm doing is I'm taking quotes from the great philosophers and thinkers throughout time. And we've as a species we've had some obviously remarkable people who have walked the face of the earth. And there is a wealth of information that is out there that a lot of times, we don't tap into. And again, even though it could be someone who's alive now, but it could be someone who lived, 3,000 years ago, who had very insightful ideas about things. So what I'm doing is I'm doing that now, and so I take a quote from a famous quote from a philosopher or teacher, and then try to apply it to today's world. How could it positively affect people today? Um, and that is actually that's my apologies. That's my other channel, which the one I'm talking about the philosophers is it's called Mind Armor. So Mind Armor, and then it's at Mind Armor dash for you, and that's about the philosophers. And I love it. And again, I'm learning through the process. I had a couple of catastrophic failures while I was trying to figure out the technology to kind of get some of these videos up. But they're getting better and better, and hopefully over time they continue to get better. So it's a learning process, and I hope people have patience with that. But the other channel I have is that's the 3M production channel, and what I'm going to be putting on there is things kind of related to like self-defense, soft skills, and some, maybe down the line, maybe some product reviews and some book reviews and things like that. And hopefully, maybe I'll have some conversations with some folks that I know over the years in the martial arts. So just exciting stuff. Just trying to explore different avenues. There's new technologies out there, and it's always fun to explore ways to, I like to create content, so it's fun for me.
Well, throw out your contact info so people can keep up with everything that you're up to.
I'll tell you, it's fun. It really is. It keeps me engaged and I learn something. Like I tell you, the process. I'll give you an example. Like so, writing the books, and they all came out relatively close in time, but I've been working on them for a time, and then I discovered I discovered that you could self-publish on Amazon. So that was a whole process trying to figure out how to get the books translated, and converted and self-published through Amazon. And then now with the video uh, production, there are days, I'll be honest, and this goes back, and it's funny, it's gonna sound so funny, but I refer to my own books, so there are days I get up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't really feel like trying to create something today, and here's what I do. And this goes back to discipline. It just happened like 2 days ago, literally. So I was trying to, break out a kind of a concept for one of the self-defense kind of shorts that I do, just some things. And again, it's not technique driven. It's soft skills driven. These videos are typically soft skill driven, like about how to avoid danger and things like that. And group dynamics and things like that. And I sat there and I was staring at the screen and nothing was coming to mind. Like nothing. I was just kind of staring there at the screen. But the fact that I sat there and I did it, and even though nothing came out that day, the next day something did. And that's one of the things that I think is so important. And I talk a lot about this all the time, when you're trying to develop yourself, whether you're learning a new skill, like, for example, things I'm doing now or things that other people are doing, is to create habits and consistency. So, for example, when I'm doing uh, right now I'm trying to break into doing the YouTube videos. So initially there was this kind of a scramble and I was trying to get everything kind of wrapped into one. And then I caught myself, I'm like, hey, I'm overwhelming myself. So now what I do is I get in front of the computer and I sit there, and I force myself to sit there for 15 minutes. And that 15 minutes may turn into a half an hour. If something comes to mind and I begin to develop something, may turn into an hour. But I commit myself showing up to the computer every day for 15 minutes. And there have been many days where nothing is really coming to mind, or the idea that I'm thinking about just isn't coming, it isn't flowing right. Like it's not coming out of my head right. It's not, I'm not typing it into the computer right. Like it's not flowing properly. Um, but the beauty of it is because I'm doing it, I'm building a pattern. And I think that's so important. And again, like I caught myself, human tendency, you find something exciting, you want to take it on, full bore, and you can overwhelm yourself, especially with everything that you have going on in life. Everyone's very, very busy today. So, for folks who maybe want to try something different, whether it's maybe they want to start walking every day, or maybe lifting weights every day, or maybe reading every day, or maybe writing a book, or whatever it might be. It could be anything. It's really important, I think, to take smaller steps. I have on my webpage, I have a blog as well, and it's called Blogging with Burk, kind of a corny title, but and one of the things I recently wrote was it's called the Milo Principle. So there's a character from Greek mythology called Milo who used to pick up every day. He would pick up a calf until the calf became a full-grown bull. So each day there was microscopic changes in the bull. Maybe not microscopic, maybe the bull might gain a pound or two. I don't know how fast bulls grow, but the idea behind it is every single day he picked up the bull until he was strong enough to pick up a full-grown bull. And the idea behind that is if you take small steps but consistent steps over time, you can really do great things. And that's also in the Japanese have a concept called kaizen, and that's taking tiny little steps every day, little tiny changes every day that are positively going in the right direction. So those small changes over time can create a huge change in you. So if you think about it, let's say, for example, you, let's say you want to try whatever it is, and you have a goal. If you think about it, if you positively move towards that goal, even 1% a week, just 1% a week, you can make a 50% positive change in your life in that particular area. So, that goes back to the power of consistency, of discipline, and of habits. And I think that those three things, along with a proper plan and being flexible to know when to change, can really change people's lives. For example, during this whole process for me, from whether, getting the books, self-published on Amazon to now doing some of the content creation and things like that. I went in with particular ideas, and some of the ideas weren't working, so I had to pivot it. I had to pivot my approach. And that's not failure. That's just kind of understanding that maybe something isn't working the way I want it to. And that came through consistency, because as I kept going forward with a particular plan, I might keep hitting a wall. And then I would ask myself, why am I hitting this wall? And that would cause me, because I was consistently doing it through habit. And then I realized, okay, I'm not getting any further. Now, what do I need to do? And then you're able to pivot and change. And I think that can change people's lives.
Throw out your webpage.
Yeah, so my webpage is it's www.thirdmonkeypro, so thirdmonkeypro.com. And I have a variety of things on there as well. I have some of the services that I offer, I'm hoping, and again, I'm building my business here. So this is kind of new for me as well. I still have a full-time job, but down the road, I'm trying to build some things that make me, be able to contribute a little bit and have some fun doing it. So, there's some services that I offer. I have my books up there. I have some free stuff, some videos and things like that, and my blog and things. So it's a lot of fun. And again, it's something it's great to do. I'm always kind of. I can tell you the difference between my webpage today, and it's going to continue to evolve as compared to what it was, let's see, 4 months ago. The thing has changed, has changed structure so many times, because I'm learning. I continually learn what's working, what's not working, what looks good. I'm always researching. Like if I want to learn something, like for example, when I'm learning about how to create YouTube content, I've spent hours just researching other YouTube channels to see what I think works and what doesn't work. And I'm doing the same thing with the webpage. So it's just a lot of fun, keeps me engaged, and I'm just having fun doing it. And that's one of the things I think it's important for people, if they do find something, have fun at it. It should be an enjoyable experience. If you're doing something that, obviously we all have to work, right? So everyone's going to go into work some days, or maybe most days, and not really happy about, having to go into work for a variety of reasons. But, if you could find kind of, and I hate to use the word because it's really, I think sometimes it's overused, but if you could find your passion, and it could be anything, and just kind of make sure you do that as much as you can. To kind of give yourself that self-satisfaction that you're doing something for yourself, and you're having, you're learning from it, or you might not even be learning from it. You just might be enjoying the experience. But I think it's really important that we take on new tasks as much as possible. We should try to enjoy the process, because you're only here once. So you should try to make the most of it and have as much fun as you can along the way.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. thirdmonkeypro.com. Check out everything that Gene's up to. Follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Jump on your favorite podcast app. Check out the show. Share it to your friends. For more information on this show, the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, go to www.curveball337.com. Be sure to check out the new website. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. Gene, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Curtis. It's been a real pleasure.
For more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, visit www.curveball337.com. Until next time, keep living the dream.